Okay, so welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your 3-minute discussion and creation of a definition. What I'd like to do now is actually to challenge you to think about your definition of independent learning and whether or not it matches the one that I will be presenting. If it does not match, what should be changed about your definition? It could also be my definition that needs to be changed. Either way, that's okay. How should it be changed? What elements are not correct or could be altered according to your thoughts? And try to keep in mind here the information that I present and what the other presenters say. Because one of the wonderful things about our general ideas within this field of research is that they do change and they do alter. So what is true, or what we know as true, can be altered over time depending on our personal experiences in the classroom, etc. So what I'd like you to think about is the final question: what resonates with you? So in terms of what people have already expressed with their understanding of independent or autonomous learning, what is it that you really feel like you could use in your classes? So I'd like to challenge you to continue to enjoy the rest of the presentations today and this presentation, but also to think about how you relate all of this information to yourself and your classroom. Alright, so the next thing I'd like to do is give us a definition of independent learning. So you can see that here in 1991, Philip Candy gave a definition, and that is: independent study is a process, a method, and a philosophy of education whereby a learner acquires knowledge by his or her own efforts and develops the ability for inquiry and critical evaluation. Now this is really important, at least the element to me of this that is really important is right here, where they acquire knowledge by his or her own efforts. Because I think it's very easy for us to think, okay, so the learner just has to go and do X, Y, and Z. But what we need to do is, as teachers, we need to guide them to not only a sense of learner responsibility, but we have to guide them in what we feel is important for them to know, and how to learn with this new type of learning. So independent learning, we are having to teach them how to learn what it is we expect them to learn. The next thing I'd like to show you is the independent learning cycle. So in order for them to be successful independent learners, basically we're training them in this particular cycle. So you can see that the first thing that they need to look at is questioning. And questioning is what you already know and what you need to find out. The next step, number 2 in the cycle, is planning. How do you want to go about your work? So for this stage, we are considering sources, time, and criteria. The next is number 3, which is find and evaluate. So finding information. The things that we need to ask ourselves about the information: is it relevant, accurate, up to date, and unbiased? A lot of my students in particular get stuck on the unbiased and up to date, because they'll go, when I give them, say for example, a paper to do, they'll go and they'll find information on Wikipedia, and they'll use that as one of their resources. But we all know that Wikipedia is biased because it's not a refereed source of information. One of the issues with Wikipedia, as I'm sure you all know, is that anybody at any time can alter the information. And so you can have information that is accurate, but also interspersed with information that is not accurate. And obviously that causes a problem if you're trying to write an academic essay where the information is supposed to be accurate. So the next stage, stage 4, is the ability to organize key information. So you look back at your questions that you had here and any other questions that came up while you were doing this process. Have you answered these questions? You are at this point deciding what information is important to keep and you're taking notes and making definitions. The next stage, synthesis, is a very important stage. It's merging the relevant information you have gathered from the different sources. So in this stage, you're explaining what your position is, what picture has emerged from your research, what do you see? We have then reflection. After we've figured out what the picture is that we can see from the research, we then look at, okay, so is it answering my questions? And if it's not answering my questions, this is actually evaluate. If it's not answering my questions, what do I need to continue to look for? I also do that in the reflection part. The next part, once we have decided on what the research for our questions means, we go and we communicate that information. So the communication of that information could be a journal article, it could be an essay for class, it could be a presentation like the one that I'm doing now. Any way that you communicate that is number 7. We then go to evaluation. So what did you do well, and what would you do differently next time? And this is a very important part of the process that frequently students skip, because this is not something that we always teach them. This is also important in a teacher process, right? One of the things that we do after we have every class, or that we should be doing after we have every class, is we sit down and we write, okay, this activity went well because of X, Y, and Z, or this activity did not do well. These are the things that I'm going to change about this activity to make it better in the future. So evaluation not only is for the steps in research, but it's what we do in class on a daily basis. And this is not something that always comes naturally to students. So this is one of the things that we want to train them in doing. And I'll explain how to train them later. Okay, so earlier when I gave you the definition by Candy of what independent learning is, we also talked very, very briefly about a responsible learner. So you can see here, these are quoted from Charlie and Sizebo in their 2000 article about independent or autonomous learning. And a responsible learner is a person who accepts that their own efforts are crucial to progress in learning and behave accordingly, a person who makes an effort in order to learn something, a person who is willing to cooperate with the teacher and others in the learning group for the benefit of all, and a person who is conscious of their own progress and makes an effort to use the available language learning opportunities. So again, this is going back to the last stage, the reflective stage. In order for you to be conscious of your own progress, you have to reflect on it, right? Another thing I wanted to point out is bullet point number 3. So a person who is willing to cooperate with the teacher and others in the learning environment. This has become more and more important. And one of the reasons for this, and why we see a lot of group work in the class, is because this is how we have to participate with each other in the environment that we have created now. So one of the things that I've found is in my workplace, I have to do a lot of group activities. If we are sitting down as teachers, creating a curriculum, working on our syllabi, etc., we are doing that as a group. Writing a test, we're doing that as a group. This is similar for learners in that when they go into the workforce, they have to work as a group. It doesn't matter what their job is, they're still working as a group. You go to McDonald's, you're part of a team. So this part of training a responsible learner is also training how to work in a group. So I'd like to leave with this quote: success in learning very much depends on learners having a responsible attitude. And the next part I'd like to talk about is, okay, so yes, they need to have a responsible attitude, but how exactly do we encourage them to have this attitude? So some of the issues to consider are motivation and self-confidence. We need to be able and willing to build that in the learners, and I think that you'll see through some of the computer programs that this is built inherently in independent learning. And one of the ways that I'm going to talk about grading through gamification actually helps with motivation and self-confidence, and I think you will see that. One of the nice things about independent learning is because it's specific to the learner, because the learners are driving it themselves, it is motivating. They know what they need to improve. They know not always how they need to improve it. That's where we guide them and then let them go as soon as they get it. But the motivation in making that improvement, once they know what it is they want to improve, is very catching for them. So monitoring and evaluation, again you see evaluation. This is self-evaluation. Monitoring is what we as teachers do in the independent learning cycle, just to make sure the students don't have further questions or are falling off task, and to see what they've completed so far. But I think a lot of the evaluation is up to them. Learning strategies, it's very important to understand as a learner how you learn, so you can train yourself to learn in a more productive way. And I will show you a website that I use in order to work with the learners on learning strategies in the following slides. So they basically identify those strategies and come up with how they can continue to learn and utilize the strategies and what their particular type of learning style is. Cooperation and group cohesion. So again, going back to being able to work together, sharing information with the learner. So one of the things that I think is very important to note is learners, and this is according to a presentation that was done at the 2014 TESOL International Conference in Portland, Oregon, this next information I'm telling you. But they basically said that videos make up 53% of internet traffic today, and this is expected to jump to 86% by 2016. So that basically tells us that when people go online, they go and they watch videos. We then see that after 72 hours, an average human can retain 95% of video. This is compared to only 10% of text. So we're looking at 72 hours, a couple days after you watch a video, you're able to retain 95% of the video versus 10% of a text. So for me, this is so important, because what I see is I want my learners to be active and to be engaged and to be excited about the information. Video does that. Just reading in the textbook, it doesn't do that as much. Of course, when they read in the textbook, we then have practice activities and we continue to work on the material. But why not supplement and have part of the independent learning section in video so that we can empower the learners to continue to retain the information for quite a long time afterwards. Some other interesting information is that mobile video has grown by 5,000% in the last 3 years, and 72% of the audience are more likely to have a greater understanding of a subject when shown a video. So that's one of the wonderful things about independent learning, is that you can share information with the learner by video to take advantage of all the percentages that I just mentioned and all the wonderful ways that video can help us to learn. We also need a little bit of consistent control, and that could be seen also as learners having control of their own learning. Delegating tasks and decisions. So this is something that comes up with independent learning as well. In terms of this, I see this in two different ways. The first is for independent learning, you have given the tasks to the students. They then have to figure out when they will complete the tasks, how they will complete the tasks, so they are responsible for their own decision-making process. For the teacher, one of the things that we see with delegating tasks and decisions is we do have some management, because when we give learners independent learning opportunities, they're not going to know how to do it immediately. One of the things that we are responsible for is training them in how the decision-making process works and what are some appropriate goals that they want to be using for this decision-making process. So that's part of the delegation that we do as teachers. In practice, this platform was what we used at the University of Macau when I used to work there. I was there for several years as a teacher in the intensive English program, or the English Language Center. So basically, what we asked them to do as part of their independent learning curriculum, so this curriculum was integrated into their normal class curriculum. So as a part of their English 101 or English 202 or whatever course they were taking with us, they also had to have this element of independent learning. And you will see that we had them to start by practicing a learning plan. And this was, as I mentioned, a part of their overall grade because it was integrated into the course itself. So a learning plan, an example of a learning plan, is described in your handout. Your handout is entitled Independent Learning Student Requirements. It gives a brief introduction to what is expected. You have Task 1, Journal 1, and this is for the students to learn what kind of a learner they are. So what are their learning styles? What are their multiple intelligences? Then they had to make a reflection about that particular style. They then went on to write journal number 2 and journal number 3, which is their practice learning plan. So they took a goal that they wanted to improve upon. Say it was they chose listening. They were at one level in listening, and then they would like to be at a higher level in listening. So they worked towards that. Or maybe it was to master a particular grammar point in 80% of their usage whenever they used that grammar form. So the teacher provides resources in an online platform, and in the next 2 slides I'll show you what some of those resources might look like. But the students go to the platform, they use the resources according to the plan that they had created. So every week I will go for, let's see, maybe 10 minutes every other day, or on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I will practice X, Y, and Z, because I understand that the more I practice X, Y, and Z, the better I will be at it. So that was part of their learning plan. They had to, midway through the semester, reflect on their learning plan and see whether or not it was working, as well as whether or not it was still reasonable. One of the problems that would happen is that the students would get very excited about what they wanted to learn, and then they would create a learning plan that didn't work. So an example of that is I had several students say that they would watch a movie in English every single night. Well, we all know that's not going to work because they still have to do the homework from their other classes. Who has 2.5 hours every night to watch a movie in English? It's not going to happen. So that is an example of a learning plan that's not going to work. And so the students had to go, oops, I understand now after the first week or the first day of not being able to watch the entire movie. I need to change this to make it more manageable for my schedule. And then finally, we had students use their home computers and or the school language learning lab to access the computers. If the students didn't have home computers, they were welcome at the language learning lab in order for them to access the teacher-created online platform. We used Moodle, and I love Moodle for housing these sorts of courses. This is an example, skill building, the learner type. So this is called the VARK questionnaire, VARK questionnaire, and basically, I'm not sure you can see it, but it asks you a series of questions. The first, for example, is you are going to cook something as a special treat. You would ask friends for suggestions. Cook something you know without need for instructions. Use a good recipe. Look on the internet or in some cookbooks for ideas or pictures. So you tick which one applies to you, and then after you have finished filling out all these questions, you get information about what type of learner are you. Are you an auditory learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Most of us have many different dimensions to our learning type. Once the students have accessed this information, the next step for them was to basically look at how they are currently learning and whether or not it's reasonable for the type of learning that they did. We also then had them look at a teacher that was teaching them, and if that teacher had a different teaching style to their learning style, they would write a journal reflecting on, okay, how do I need to change the activities that I do when I do my self-study so that I can make my experience in the class more manageable or better for me in terms of the learning process. So another one that's important to teach is study skills. So study skills are crucial as a student, yeah? So we can see here there's howtostudy.com, and howtostudy.com, we have many different elements from math to language arts to note-taking, taking tests, remembering information, etc., etc. So this particular website has a lot of free tips that students can access in order for them to learn to study in a better way. Okay, so these are two examples of some of the information that is important for us to train students to be able to use. After you introduce the skill building section of your course, the next thing you allow them to do is what I explained earlier, where they're actively engaged in their own learning plan. So in that part, you want to give them access to a series of other information like vocabulary tools. Other study skills are analytical tools or basic skills. Some of the students that I have come in and they're not always so comfortable using Word or PowerPoint, things of that sort. Specific skills. Whenever you have them do an activity in class, it's important if you're going to have them film a movie, for example, or not film a podcast, but do a podcast. It's important to teach them how to use the software they're going to need to use in order to film the movie or in order for them to record the podcast. So for example, if they were to do Audacity, to use Audacity, the free software for recording the podcast, they would need to learn how to use it, and you can teach them that on this particular platform. So what else would you use or would you add to this list? I'd like you to take 3 minutes to think about and talk with each other about what you might add to this list. We have vocabulary, analytical skills. An example might be writing skills. How are you going to support their writing skills? So just talk for 3 minutes and think about something that you might add to the list.